Hello and welcome to the Dustin and Eric Podcast Show, brought to you by Mimosa Networks. Hi, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Eric.
And today we're on episode number 10, talking to an actual WISP from start to finish. Today, our special guest joining us is Gino Villarini from Aeronet in Puerto Rico. Welcome to the show.
Right.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm the owner and founder, CEO of Aeronet Wireless Broadband in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I've been in business for 17 years. Born and raised in San Juan. I was raised into, into the industry, more or less, in the telecom. My father used to own a two-way radio company and then moved on to paging. So I just basically grew within the entrepreneurial and telecom spirit, to say the least.
Awesome. So we'll go on and we'll catch up with Eric and myself. So Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about your weekend?
Oh, it was exciting. Actually, I've been out kind of under the weather the last couple of days. I was last 4 days. I just stayed at home. Anyway, I've been at home watching The Love Connection, the new one. So you get a couple of guys out there and a girl, and they answer questions. They go out on a date and they see if they make a match, or not. So I've been watching that. I was thinking about applying for that show, but I don't think my wife would probably go for that.
Yeah,
that's my big weekend.
Wow. Yeah, I've got a little.
How about you?
Sore throat here myself.
Oh, really? How sore?
Super sore.
The doctor is in. Super. That could be serious. Where's that in the down here?
Yeah, somewhere in here. Yeah.
That's from my professional opinion. That's you better get that checked out.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
No charge.
So, this weekend I went to Saratoga, California. Didn't know that they had a car show going on, so we
Nice.
checked out some of the fancy cars that people had over there and went to the Hocone Gardens again and did some amateur photography. So, moving on here.
And now it's time for the interrogation room where we answer submitted questions from the audience.
All right.
Oh, number one. Should I replace my LMR coax jumpers and how often?
Well, Eric, you have your opinion on this?
Oh, replace my jumpers. I would have those inspected. When we go on site, we inspect the quality of the jumper, the ends. Make sure there's the seal still around with the self-vulcanizing tape, the coax seal, all that stuff, and you can actually pull those off and look inside. Make sure there's no moisture or water ingress in the connectors, and so on. I would, good coax jumpers last for several years, as far as I've seen out in the field. So I don't know when we would. I think if you see some issues on the coax, maybe then you would replace them, especially if there's moisture or any dissimilar metals or cheap connectors that will show signs of rust or any shavings and so on the connector.
Gino, do you have any trouble with moisture in your coax?
Probably, well, being in Puerto Rico, it's very tropical. We get a lot of rain, so even now and then you get some moisture inside of those. Probably due, I would say, to improper taping of the connectors or weatherproofing.
Right.
I would like to add, if you're in a co-located tower, I would recommend to inspect those cables every now and then, just to see. Maybe sometimes other crews working on the tower might nick the cover of the cable, and water will come through that nick. So just do some general inspection when you're there just doing some work. Inspect those coax cables just to make sure in the future when you don't get trouble with water coming into it.
Right.
Yep. Also, if you've got loose connectors, there's a big one. Loose connector. Yeah. You could have some Intermod or some other RF products or IF could mix with co-located radios and stuff, causing interference, et cetera, for the other person or the other company into your other radios, et cetera. So we want to make sure the connectors are all tight.
All right. So
number two, no matter how tight I make my antenna, the wind keeps moving it. What do I do to prevent this?
Well, there's a couple of different options.
We're talking about the mount.
Yeah, you're talking about the mount. So you can always with larger dishes put a a bar on the dish connecting to the tower to better support it. You can also, some antenna mounts, you can actually flip the bracket around for smaller diameter pipe, depending on what the diameter is you're actually mounting to.
The clamshell
Right.
reverse one side.
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on this, Eric?
Yeah, that goes with going up the tower, or you're on a rooftop, just making sure everything's tightened down. Sometimes if we see a difference in signal quality, say at an access point into the client field, go in there and maybe make slight adjustments. Maybe take a sector, for example. Maybe it did move a little bit, and so maybe you want to re-peak something. Or from the client side, you want to re-peak a little bit in case something moved around. Some of these antennas, present a little wind load on the wind side of things, and can move out of alignments.
So how windy does it get there in Puerto Rico? Probably pretty windy, right?
Well, we just had a hurricane last year, so we
Right.
had over 175 miles per hour winds. So we did have a fair share of dealing with with stuff blowing out of towers, getting misaligned or disaligned by wind. So not knowing exactly the type of equipment the users or the person asking the question was referring to, I will say that with big dishes, you definitely need to add some stiff arms to it, just to secure. We usually did one and learned the hard way, and now we're doing two towers. So anything above 2 feet in dish size, we just do two arms to the tower on different points. On the customer side, that's a little bit more difficult, but it can be done if you're using 2-foot dishes on customer side. And with sectors, I don't have any idea how to, add a stiff arm to a sector. We haven't done that, but sectors not tend to move. You having a sector moving with wind, maybe it has to do with the bracket or something, I would say.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Number 3, what are some of the additional mounting options for a client radio besides on the roof?
Well, what do you think, Eric?
Client radio. What are some additional mounting options?
So the poles in the yard, if you have to, on the soffit. There's lots of different options here. Eric, where's some of the places you've had to mount radios?
We've done under roof eaves, invert a 19-inch J mounts, maybe even a weighted down non-pen mount on the ground. As long as and when you're going from the ground shooting up to an AP, you just got to make sure you got the line of sight and such.
What about your special install in Carmel Valley?
Special, which one was that?
Has to do with chickens.
Oh, there you go. Hit. There's so we had a house, and I needed to put a Mimosa C5 radio on somewhere on the house, and the houses had obstructions 360 from oak trees all the way around. So I was looking at a large tree. I was going to invert them out on a tree branch upside down and push that in. And I thought, and then we looked for an alternate spot, and that was on a chicken coop. So at about 280 feet, 280-foot run of Cat 6 direct burial, I put one on a chicken coop and named it at the AP. It was just fine. And so far, the chickens are leaving the Cat 6 alone.
Well, the chickens have Wi-Fi, so they have no reason to mess with it.
They're happy. Those are some happy chickens.
So, Gino, what's the most interesting client install that you've had?
Well, it's been a long time since I haven't done any installs, but I will say that maybe on a palm tree. In WISP business, you got to get very creative sometimes just to have that clean line of sight.
Now, I'm sorry. How high up on the palm tree? Because depending on the height of the tree, it has some sway, right?
Yeah. I would say like halfway through it, as far as I can remember. But
that 40 feet?
Maybe like 30, 35, something like that. Yeah.
Got to do what it takes, Eric.
Yep.
Got to get that service to those people.
Nice. You got it.
Especially on the beach.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Number 4. Where are the best places to place my micro pops?
It really depends on the neighborhood. It depends on who owns the light poles or the utility poles. It really depends. Personally, I think getting on the utility poles out the road would be better because you've got,
Yeah.
or you should normally have line of sight up and down the street, and then those homes normally have at least somewhat line of sight to those poles. And if you place them, 200 or 300 meters down the street on those poles, then those houses will always have or should have line of sight to at least one of the poles you put your micro pops on. Gino, do you do micro or mini pops in Puerto Rico?
Yeah, we done a couple of them, and I will say that for us, more in the business side of the whole micropop deal is that you need a place that you're gonna be sure that that place is gonna be with you for a long time. So we tend to prefer poles instead of houses because maybe down the road you get some issues with the house owner, and then you have to change your whole net. So it's
Right.
better to have a long-term solution, a long-term relationship with whatever entity it is that owns the poles. So you assure that 5 years, 10 years down the road, that pole, that AP is still there on that pole. You don't have to go around the whole network and realign those customers.
Okay. Excellent.
Number 5, what is your next podcast series going to be about?
So our next podcast series will be about actually installation best practices. So for those people out there who are beginners or even intermediate folks who have questions about installing on towers or on roofs or whatever, grounding, cabling, that's what the next show will be about. So we'll definitely spend a lot of time talking about those topics.
All right. 6, does Mimosa have any new products coming soon?
I can't talk to you about that. Why are you asking me? But you should come to WISPapalooza this year. You might find something out.
Skunkworks, Mimosa Skunkworks.
Da, 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 da.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and start on today's main course. We're going to grill Gino here for some info about his network and how he started. So we'll go ahead and get started here. You said you've been doing this work for about 17 years now.
Yeah.
So why did you become a WISP exactly?
When or why?
Why?
Why? That's a fairly great question. And basically, 70 years ago, I was on a different industry. I had like a small chain of cellular retail stores. We were reselling AT&T and other carriers networks, phones and stuff like that. And by that time, I got married, moved to a new house, and the place that I moved didn't have any sort of broadband connection. And broadband back then was like 256K,
Right.
Or 512. That was it. Through DSL, it was very limited, the footprint of the coverage of broadband connection. So I started researching a way to put a broadband connection into my business, which had a connection, and send it to the area that I lived. So basically, it was just a need to have a fast internet at my home. So I started doing some research, and back then there were no Mimosas, no Cambiums, not even Canopy was available back then. Just most of the starting WISP was just hacking their own equipment, putting Wi-Fi cards together with modified software, doing jumpers and doing their own CPEs. With even PoE was very scarce. So it was very interesting to just we to start to research this. And I had a little bit of telecom background, so for me, wireless technology was not new. So I decided on some equipment back then. It was I started testing the Symbol, which sold Wi-Fi cards for scanners and stuff like that. And I kind of jerry-rigged that into a point-to-point link. And contacted a neighbor nearby that had a small house on the hill. Pay him $100 a month, install a small tower, and shoot a point-to-point link to my office. And as soon as I had service on my house, then my neighbor wanted service, and the other neighbor wanted service, and then my neighbor had a small business down the road, and he wanted service. So just kind of blew from there.
Yeah, it just kind of balloons out once you start.
Yeah. Yep.
So, how many employees did you start with on the WISP side of the business, and how many do you have now?
I started with 0. It was myself. So for let's couple of first 2 years I was all by myself. First year was like part-time. I was doing this. I had my other business and doing this part-time. By 1 year in, I decided to sell my other business and go full in on this one. And I would say by the third year, I was able to bring some help part-time, and then that became full-time, and even brought my dad to work with me. And 17 years later, we have about 53 employees, I believe, 54.
Oh, boy.
So, how many of those are installers?
Okay, I would say about 10 to 12.
Okay, and
Yeah.
do your installer crews work in twos, or do they work by themselves? How do you run those crews?
Great question. That's something that we discuss every 3 months.
Well, I know it's a common discussion out there. So
Yeah, the efficiency of having single or dual crews. We have settled on having like 3 to 4 techs that like very experienced ones go alone at it, and then having 2 crews that they're paired. And we usually, the hard jobs or the difficult ones that are more the ones that take more time or are like on very high roofs or commercial buildings, we give it to the 2-man crews.
okay.
And then the single ones we do services and less difficult stuff.
You have a couple of tower guys, or is it kind of?
Yes, we have a full-time tower crew. Right now, there are four tower climbers on that crew. Yeah, apart for the 12 technicians that go and do installs and services.
What are your maybe your taller towers? How tall are those? About?
I would say like 250 feet.
Oh, wow, up there. Well,
Yeah.
I bet those are really guide down for down on the island. Right?
Actually, that's a self-support. The big
Self-support.
a big crown castle self-support tower. Yeah.
Crown Castle. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what were your biggest challenges when starting out?
At first, I will say that the industry was not consolidated or was not ready, maybe for lack of a better word, and it was like making my own CPEs back then.
So basically, the wild, wild west of wireless.
Yes. Then I started like testing every equipment that came out back then. The first company that I remember came out with a full-featured integrated CPE that you just had to run POA to it was a company called Raylink. They used to, they don't have 6, but they use frequency hopping technology. Back then, all integrated CPE with antenna, everything was kind of the bomb, let's say. So I deployed some of their stuff, and then other companies came out with some equipment, and then even I continued doing hacking equipment for part of my network, and eventually Motorola came out with Canopy. Even though it was more expensive equipment, I decided just to move into to Canopy network just to have a similar experience of through the network and standardizing something.
Mm-hmm. All right. So
the other part I would say, just to add up to that, is funding of financial stuff. Back then, it was pretty expensive. CPEs were $400 to $600. And APs were in the 2 to 3. Well, APs still in the same range, but the CPEs were pretty expensive, even if you did it your own or buying CPEs from manufacturers. So the funding part was to some sort of is one of the challenges too.
Right. So did you have people that helped invest in your company for this, or did this come out of your pocket, or did you have to get loans, or how did you start deploying all this product and making your money back?
About a year in, I brought in let's say a capital investor.
Mm-hmm.
That it was my father-in-law, so it was pretty easy to sell it to him.
Right.
You put a lot of trust into this new internet thing, and we struck a deal, and we became partners in this part. And I managed the whole thing, and he just provided the capital to grow the company. For the next 2 years, he provided ongoing capital, and from then on, the company was able to fund itself.
Excellent. We're going to start here on questions that relate to the shows that we've done so far. So the first show was evaluating an area before deployment. So what do you look for when evaluating an area for potential deployments?
Right now, we just go about customer needs, and by that I mean that since we're mostly a business ISP, I will say like 80% of our customer base is businesses. We expand our network based on the needs of our customers. If we sign up a customer that have, let's say, like 20 retail locations, and we have coverage in 18 retail locations, then we add our network, we grow our network to provide service to those 2 other locations that are out of coverage area.
Right.
So basically, it's more driven by the customer demand. Since we've been 17 years in the business, we have a fairly large network that covers most of the island. So right now, instead of growing the network, we're just densifying it, adding more towers within the coverage area just to add more density and more capacity to it.
So you cover much of the island. Are there how about competition or are there ISPs?
Yeah, the Puerto Rico market is very fierce. I would say before the hurricane, I counted over 100 WISP serving the market. A lot of them were regional and small, that they covered just 1 or 2 municipalities or counties. But I would say that right now there are about 5 or 6 that cover the whole island, or most of it, and like maybe 10 or 15 that are fairly big regional wireless ISPs, and then the whole other bunch of them that are very small that just cover certain sectors or areas. So it's pretty fierce market.
Wow. And you mentioned the hurricane. Was that Katrina, right? No. Which
one
was it?
Maria.
I'm sorry,
last year.
Maria.
Yeah.
Did you have how much of your infrastructure remained up? Or you have and say backup power supplies, generation?
After the hurricane, I will say that like 10 to 50% of the network was up.
Did you see folks from global support coming in, say United States, for example, and others come in and provide additional, say, WISP or backup services, communications during that?
There were some efforts spearheaded by FEMA, and obviously some private companies came in and to help out, mostly in the reconstruction and to provide some sort of telecom services. We had some people, actually Google Loon sent out a couple of their balloon things to provide service and cell service mostly.
Orbiting, the Google orbiting balloons mesh system.
Yeah, they provided cell service in some areas, and we have some sort of people coming from the States do some sort of small regional network just to provide Wi-Fi services to certain very disconnected areas.
Oh, okay, very good.
So, do you own any towers, or do you just rent those?
We own, but mostly are rented. We are at over 150 towers right now. I would say like 10 of those are our property. The rest we rented on them. One of the factors that I'd say that we rent those towers is that since we have so many WISP here in Puerto Rico, noise is a big problem.
Right.
And by going into a big carrier class tower, we tend to be alone at that tower. So we minimize noise. We're paying a lot more rent on the tower, but we're minimizing noise in the neighborhood.
Okay. Are you looking at buying or owning more towers in the future, or are you going to stick with the model you have now?
Not really. The tower business here is pretty crowded. We got Crown Castle, SBA, American Tower, and and the permitting process here is pretty brutal. So
okay.
Yeah, we don't want to lose our focus in the WISP just to do some tower stuff.
How's the spectrum look in your areas?
Man!
And where you're mostly at? You're on the backhauls mostly on say 5 a gig, or where you
No,
at?
our backhaul
lower.
is mostly licensed.
Oh,
I would
okay.
say 6 and 11 gig, and we leave 5 gig just for access. And even then, it's like average noise floor is minus 70,
Oh,
minus 60 sometimes.
holy cow!
Yeah,
So
it's pretty brutal.
your links are
Brutal.
pretty short then.
Yeah. Our network,
Right.
especially in the San Juan metro area, our coverage rings, we just do like 1 mile, stuff like that, just to be able to go over the noise.
So because of that spectrum, does it determine how you deploy your point-to-multipoint networks?
Yeah.
So besides the 1 mile radius, do you have any spectrum available there that we don't hear, or is it about the same?
No, it's the same. Just Puerto Rico or political situations is to sum it up. We just like a state, we don't get to vote for the president. So basically, that's it.
All right.
Same rules.
So our second show was about finding a backbone provider. So can you tell us about your backbone provider or providers? Where do you get your internet from?
We currently have 3 providers, and being on an island is very very different from being in the States. We have about 7 cables that come into Puerto Rico. Most of them come from South Florida. I think just 1 cable comes from New York City. So when choosing cables, we have to take that into account. Which cable are we using? Is the upstream provider using the same cables? Because if that cable gets cut, then we're out. So some providers have rings that go through Puerto Rico and then onto the other islands, but back again to South Florida. Others don't. So that becomes part of the equation. You can translate that in the States to having your backbone coming from different routes, east, west, or stuff like that. So I would say price is king, making a decision on bandwidth. But secondary to us is just where is that bandwidth coming from? For us, the cables coming into island, but in the same case for provider in the States, they need to choose different routes that come from different points. Fibers get cut on one end. You don't want to be out.
So you're coming in down from the supply from the Keys or from the Atlantic down New York. So there's a ring also coming up from let's see, top of Venezuela through Aruba, kind of, and over the Virgin Islands, etc.
That cable, that cable is owned by Liberty Media right now. It's called the Arcos cable, and basically just island hopping from the States, goes to first to the Bahamas, then the Dominican Republic, and then goes around and goes to the small islands on the east, goes to Venezuela. I don't know if it lands on Venezuela, I'm not sure, but it goes around Aruba, that area, goes back to Mexico, and goes back into the States. Yep.
Interesting.
When it comes to SLA agreements and your providers, what kind of agreements do they provide, and is that important to you and your network? Yeah,
well, I would say definitely we try to bring that into the equation when we negotiate with our stream provider. The SLA is basically what you got on your hands to make a claim to your upstream provider when they're having any issues.
Mm-hmm.
So nailing that down is pretty important to your operation.
Right, and hopefully they're pretty reliable, right? The ones that you have.
Yeah, we hadn't have big issues with our providers. Sometimes cables get cut in the ocean.
Right. Not a whole lot you can do about that.
Not a whole lot you can do about that. So that's the reason we have 3 providers.
Okay.
How long does it take to say you get a main feed cut like that? You have to cut over, switch over. How long does that take to switch over, something like that, for your provider?
We usually use the 3 providers at the same time.
Okay.
With BGP. So, but if one gets cut off, traffic takes a couple of milliseconds just to switch over
to route. Oh,
yeah.
Gotcha.
So yeah, the users probably won't really see that at all.
Okay.
Not really, no.
Unless they're on a VoIP call, maybe.
Right, maybe a voice call.
Right. Freeze up the screen.
All right, so the third show is about physical network planning and design. So what services or softwares do you use to plan out your network, or do you use any of that?
To plan the wireless side of the network?
Right. So like towercoverage.com
Okay.
or the Mimosa design tool, things like that.
Yeah. We use Radio Mobile. Pretty old school software.
Right.
So we started using that. We kind of stick to that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
and it's vendor agnostic, and we just use it.
Yeah, I've heard a
Yeah.
lot of people that use Radio Mobile. Actually, they built tower coverage off of Radio Mobile, so I know tons of people out there use it, or at least some offshoot of it.
Right. It's very good software, and a very expensive. It's free. It's not expensive. So I'm sorry. It's free, and it had a lot of options and tweaks and knobs that you can
Cool.
play with. So
I'll have to check that out again.
It takes a little bit of learning curve, but
Right.
nothing too bad.
So before you start deploying in an area, do you do any kind of site surveys on the area you want to cover?
Yeah. We usually, if we're going on a tower, we go to a tower, take pictures, do a site survey, do a spectrum scan too, just to make sure the spectrum it's not clean. It's not a big clean here in Puerto Rico, but it's at least acceptable.
Right. So how often are trees an issue for you?
They're pretty often an issue. To say that the only advantage we have here is that the island is not flat, so we have a lot of mountains that we have our towers into the mountain, and then we can overcome the trees with an angle coming from the mountain.
Right. So what frequencies do you deploy for point to multi-point besides 5 gig?
We're mostly 5 gig, but we have some cases that we use 2.4 for non-line of sight when there's no other option, and also 900 megahertz.
Okay. And so the next show was internal networking. So what vendor or vendors do you use for your routers, your switches, your firewalls?
Well, we started a long time ago with MikroTik. I will say that our first router was a PC with a T1 card and a floppy disk loaded with MikroTik.
All right.
It
Thanks,
was like
Dad.
17 years ago.
Your father probably helped with that T1 part of it. Huh?
It was a version 2 point something of MikroTik. And MikroTik helped us a lot growing our network. Then we outgrew it, and we moved on to Juniper. So now our current network, we do BGP for the outbound routes, and then inside our network runs OSPF, and on top of OSPF we run MPLS and VPLS, and we use Juniper for that.
Okay. Yeah, Juniper is really good, but also very expensive. So it's
Yeah. There's some gray market stuff that you can get a good pricing on. So it's just you need to look, need to know where to look.
Right. So I know a lot of folks out there use MikroTik. So at what point did you decide you needed to switch from MikroTik to Juniper?
It was like let's say like 5 years ago, when we started moving from services that were 20, 25, 50 megs into services that were 100, 200, 500, 1 gig services, where we saw some issues with MikroTik handling those kinds of bandwidth.
Right.
Our upstreams right now are 10 gig connections, and we got customers that range in the gigs. So we started seeing some issues with MikroTik. We were running MPLS and VPLS with MikroTik, and we started seeing some issues on the network. So we decided to look for alternatives.
Okay. So does your network run on VLANs? Do you use subnets, or do you use a little bit of both on your network?
Everything.
Okay.
We use the main backbone runs, like I said, MPLS and VPLS, and then we branch out and use VLANs into some towers and into the APs, and even we use VLANs to some subscribers that have different services with us. We sell dedicated internet service. We sell broadband internet. We sell WAN services, or let's say point-to-point private connections. So depending on the type of a service the customer requires, then we use a different set of tools for it.
Okay.
And tools, you run anything like smoke ping, iPerf for troubleshooting?
Yeah, well,
throughput?
we monitor our network with the network software called Intermapper, which is basically a monitoring software that you add your devices to, and it uses SNMP and ICMP and all those protocols to monitor the condition of the devices on the network and take it from there.
Okay. So the next show was talking about building your infrastructure. So what type of Ethernet cabling do you use normally?
For installs,
For tower installs or for home installs?
yeah, we use basically two cables. We use a outdoor Cat5 cable for pretty much all the installs, and for towers, we used to use a without mentioning any brands, we used to use let's say a medium quality outdoor tower cable. It was shielded, but in a hurricane, we learned a pretty nice lesson. With all the winds, the cable started to move in towers, even though you attach to a tower, with 150 miles winds, that the cable start to move, and with that moving, the cable started to get nicks.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And with the nicks, the water came in.
Ooh.
So we had a lot of tower sites that basically just tons of water came down the cables into the shelter.
Interesting.
So yeah, so now we just all the equipment that we replaced during the hurricane, we use a new cable that is double shielded. It has like a copper core. It's very
nice.
high-end cable, very expensive one, but we learned a lesson with the hurricane event. So everything that was new was installed with that cable, and anything that's left with the old cable is being replaced now on the towers.
So I could see. So on a tower, you have sharp bolts, nuts.
Yep.
Welds that aren't perfect or really
Right.
sharp, slag, whatever. And that's a good point. I think we'll look at that kind of stuff on our side too. Good point.
Yeah.
And we do, and we look at stress points, but of course we don't get any wind over here. Over whatever 50 miles an hour or 60 maybe. But yeah, that's a very good point. We look at when we look at stress points on coax and on feed points to radios, and our cat runs as well. But good information there.
Yeah, we had a pretty nice run. We had like 16 years we had a hurricane. So my whole business lifetime, we just didn't have any event like this one. So it was like a wake up call and a time to revise procedures and discover things like this.
And on the flip side, now I worked up for telecom up in the Arctic, right on the Arctic Ocean, at the top of the planet, outside of Barrow and way up in Alaska, right? And so on the flip side of hurricane, we had ice, right? A little snow here and there, but it was all ice, and so the ice loads, because the temperature you get some snow and then it melts a little bit, then you get these big icicles. And just loads. It's kind of the same thing where you just have to look at where you're going to load up, what's going to move. Coax, copper, fiber, everything's got to be nice. And I guess through our teams we just made sure everybody paid attention on installs, etc. And you always had a second pair of eyes looking at things. And I guess wherever you're at around the world, you kind of got to look at your own installations and. Make sure everything's tight.
Every environment has its challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
So, how often do you ground, and what do you ground? Everything, or just some items?
Well, yes, we try to ground on our towers everything. It's also that has been sort of not new, but our company started using mural canopy equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, the old canopy just was a plastic case.
Right.
The benefit of that is that it minimized any sort of problems with lightning. So on the old days, we just ran the cable from the equipment down to the shelter, call it a day, and we didn't have any issues with the radio was isolated from everything. But nowadays, it's different. We kind of a couple of years ago started a program to ground all the infrastructure. We mostly do up in the tower, ground it to a bus bar, and then run the cable down to the ground. Sometimes we have to check if the tower is pretty fairly grounded,
Right.
and then if not, add our own ground to the tower. We got copper issues, thieves taking out copper from towers. So sometimes we have to revise and see if the ground is still there. So it's a challenge, but we try to ground everything.
Boy, those copper thieves are everywhere.
Yeah, sadly.
North America, South America, Central America, and the
we
islands.
got issues with copper and with batteries too. They steal the batteries.
Yep, sure.
So what about at client installs on businesses or residences? Do you ground there as well?
If they are in a very high building, we do. But mostly we don't.
Okay.
We put a search arrestor, and on the Cat 5 coming in, that's it. And we haven't had a lot of issues with that.
All right. So you mentioned people stealing batteries. So you do battery backups at your tower sites?
Yeah, the power here in the island is not reliable. The power company have been having some financial issues for the last 5 years. So, maintenance is not at its best. So that tends to translate into power problems. So yes, we have battery backup on every site, and on some sites even have batteries and generators, depending on the load and obviously the size of the size of the site. We have a lot of equipment in there. We add a standby generator, and also depending on the importance of that tower. If a tower that feeds other towers or have very high-end customers, it's basically a equation of business and services being provided.
You have fluctuations incoming from the commercial mains, main AC power coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you guys are probably, I don't know, 50 hertz or so out there. But there's nasty spikes and fluctuations in that stuff. So running into a battery bank or something, depending on your wiring, that'll smooth some of that out.
That helped a lot at us. We moved from all our sites were like AC and had a AC UPS and external batteries on that UPS to extend the runtime. But we have AC issues, and we started moving from a AC plant to a DC plant.
Yeah, so
putting rectifiers and battery banks, and then
get some
feeding everything from the rectifier. So it helped a lot in cleaning out issues with it.
Clean out to get some smooth sine wave in there, and the equipment's certainly happy and stays within tolerances and stuff.
That's right. Yeah, it helped a lot.
Yep.
So because of the big hurricane you guys had last year, have you started moving toward solar, or were you already using solar power before?
We were using solar on a small scale. I would say we had some sites that were didn't make any business sense to. They didn't have power from the power company, and didn't make any sense to contract and build out the power to feed the site. So we went to solar on those sites, but that expanded after the hurricane. There's still today there's some areas without power in the island. So for us to, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, go ahead.
So being able to reestablish service for us became, rebuilding the network, and also looking for power strategies. And that meant either adding solar panels to the sites, or just run the sites on generators.
How about wind power? Is that too expensive to run some turbines? Is it not reliable?
We haven't looked into it. Actually, I'm going to be frank. I never tried it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I hear. Yep. I hear you.
I do know that there's some big wind farms that lost the.
Well, they came down.
They lost everything on the
on
the wind farms. Yep.
All right, so show number 6, we talked about building and customer management. So what kind of tier plans do you offer?
Everything.
So starting
basically, we started at speeds 15 megs. This is the smallest plan we offer.
Okay.
And that goes up to gigs. 10 gig.
Just depends on business or residence, or do you offer that to both?
Well, the strategy that we do is that we don't offer services we don't have residential plans.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that the market, there's the WISP here in Puerto Rico, and then you have the local telco and the local cable company are also very competitive. So we don't want to get into a marketing and sales war with the big companies. So we don't target the residential market. We do offer a small business plan that if the customer wants to put it in his house, then we don't have any issues. So basically, our billing, our plans are designed for small businesses. So they're a little bit higher on the price side, but there are a lot of customers that are very disgruntled with their current provider, and they pay more just to have a better experience, better service.
Wow, 50 megs for a start. That's very
No.
respectable.
No, sorry, 15. 1.5.
Oh, 1.5. Excuse
Yeah,
me.
that's the smallest one. But yeah,
that's
we
still
do
decent.
offer 15, 20, 25, and 50.
Oh,
That's
okay.
like the basic broadband plans that we offer.
So how do you do your traffic shaping on your network?
We use a two-year approach. We do it at the CPE, and also we have a traffic management appliance at the core network.
Okay. Can you elaborate on your appliance? Give a brand
Yeah,
name?
sure. Okay. I didn't know I can mention
No, that's fine.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. We use Procera.
Okay.
We were using Procera for last, let's say, 4 to 5 years. Before that, we were using Microtech,
Right.
to do the bandwidth shaping.
Yeah.
But then we moved into Procera.
Procera seems to be a pretty common one these days.
Yep. But sadly, they got bought by Sendvine and then kind of lost their magic, I will say. They now are more expensive, and services to the small businesses like the WISP market, they're like not that good as they were before. So possibly we're gonna look into other alternatives in the near future.
So does Procera do billing for your customers as well, or just traffic shaping?
No, just traffic shaping. We for billing we used to use Platypus,
Right.
which is like very old school ISP billing software.
Mm-hmm.
And then we moved to last year we moved to Sonar.
Okay.
We're in the process, so we migrated to the billing to Sonar, and in the process of also moving our ticketing system into it.
Okay. Yeah, Sonar was actually on that episode of the show. So.
Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
Kudos for them.
And for technical support, do you do in-house support? Do you have guys there that do that, or do you send that out to a third-party service?
No, we have in-house. Basically, we have about staff of, I would say like 14 to 16 tech support employees, and we do it in-house.
Do they handle everything or just WISP stuff? Do you guys
elaborate?
Do you guys do more than just WISP work now? Since you said that your business before did other telco work, or is it just WISP work now?
Well, on the business side, we provide internet service through our WISP network.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a fiber network that we offer services through it, and also services that go along with within the portfolio, like voice over IP, manage firewall and manage Wi-Fi services, that kind of stuff.
Right. So those 16 handle all of that.
Oh yeah, they handle everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the next show, marketing to your customers. You said you don't really do marketing wars like that. So do you market to businesses at all, or is it just basically word of
Yes.
mouth?
No, we do market. I am fairly big believer in marketing. So marketing is the lifeblood of your company. So yes, we do market to companies. We do market to the broad range of the market, like small, medium, and large businesses, and each segment have different tactics to market it.
Right.
For the small businesses, we do a lot of social media marketing, especially Facebook.
Right.
And then when you go higher in the business size, medium and large business, the different tactics for it, more like email marketing and meetings, conferences, and stuff like that.
Okay. And for installing new customers, how often do you communicate with a new customer during the setup process?
Lots.
Okay.
Our process, if the customer calls in, we provide them with the information of our services. If he wants to sign up, then we send him a online digital form that he fills out, and then he receives our service agreement through email. He can sign it digitally and send us it back, and then our customer service representative or sales representative will call him to just go over the document to make sure that everything is within what he ordered, and then it goes to the installer department. So installer manager will call the customer to set up and schedule the installation appointment. And after everything is installed, then the customer is called the day after the install just to make sure everything went smooth. If you have any problems or any questions with the service, and I'll say that's it. Yeah, and then yeah.
So after your last call with them, right after it's done, do you follow up with them a few weeks or a few months later to see if they're still happy, or do you wait for them to call in?
No, after that call, I'll say that we're done with proactively calling the customer. Then it converts into a customer call if he has any problem. But we have discussed to do a follow up later on within the term of the agreement of the customer.
Okay. And when you guys are out normally installing radios on a customer home, where do they try to install? On the peak of the roof, the soffit, or what do they aim for when they go out?
Usually the roof. Here in Puerto Rico, the structures of the houses are flat roof.
Okay.
So we don't have to deal with peaks and stuff like that. So we usually go and point a roof that provides the clean line of sight.
Okay, good. And then the last show we did was troubleshooting and maintenance. So you talked a little bit earlier about a system you have in place that kind of looks at your network, and it does SNMP, and it does graphing like power levels and stuff like that on your radios. Yep. And that was Procera, or was that something else?
No, that's Intermapper.
Intermapper, right.
Yep.
So how much does that cost you, or is that a free service?
No, it's not free.
Okay.
Sadly,
I
wish.
know there's plenty of free softwares out there that do similar things.
There are plenty of free software. The thing is that we started with Intermapper and kind of grew it so big that right now it's going to be a project just to move out of it.
Okay.
So they got us locked in. But they license the software by the amount of devices that you have in your network. So we currently are monitoring over 3,000 devices.
Okay.
So it becomes a little bit expensive for us.
Right.
But for other smaller ISPs, I would think that the value of it is pretty straightforward. Right. The good thing about the software is that it has most of the wireless equipment probes built in. So you don't have to deal with the specific SNMP and do any sort of a custom thing. You just add the IP and the IP of the device and the type of device that you want to monitor, and it will take it from there.
So with Intermapper, you're using Intermapper at about 3,000 customers using Intermapper. So if you go to 6,000, Intermapper will grow. It'll handle that many clients, etc. It's okay.
I don't think that the software has any growing issues.
Okay.
We have used it for a long time and have never had any issues with managing that amount of devices. We do not monitor every client on it. Yeah. So even though we're monitoring 3,000 devices, that's not our whole network of customers. But I don't think that's going to be an issue growing on it.
There you go. Okay.
So when you have a customer site or a tower site go down, what's the first thing that you check?
Good question. First thing we do is we go into this monitoring software and see what happened. We check if let's say the power went out. We check if the signals of the backhaul were fading. So that will give us like a little bit of information to see if it's maybe the outage is power related, or the outage is related to equipment, or it's related with even in routing,
Right.
or is maybe some weather related. It's maybe a lightning storm passing by and the tower went out. That maybe lightning hit the tower or nearby, or something went out. So we try to pull information from this software and other sources that we use, like weather maps and stuff like that, just to have a clearer picture of maybe what happened. And then we dispatch crews and see what kind of damage was done.
Or you can still ping the radio, let's say, but it's something in the maybe something on the in the cloud there, or the in the intermapper itself. There's a little reset, or
right.
sometimes.
Sometimes we use some remote management switches that if the backhaul is up, we can remotely reboot equipment from our facilities. So that it's just going to be one of the steps. But if the backhaul is down and we cannot reach anything on the tower, then we just have to go there and bring up some information to try to evaluate what happened.
Yeah.
So how often do you perform routine maintenance at your tower sites?
That's a fairly good question, because before the hurricane was thing, after hurricane was another.
Right.
We after a hurricane, we spent a lot of time rebuilding our network. Out of we have 150 towers and about maybe 60 rooftops. So our whole network is about 200 plus sites, and we basically had to redo everything after a hurricane. So it took us about 4 to 5 months just to rebuild everything back to who it was before the hurricane. So that process still it's being tweaked right now. Even though the network is up, there's some things that we did just to put the service back on, and then we have to go back and do the stuff like we're supposed to do it.
Right. Yeah, you got to catch up with everything.
Temporary stuff that we had to do just to bring out service. After before the hurricane, the plan that was in place was to visit our sites at least twice a year, just to check, everything.
Okay.
Check cabling, check the batteries, check the equipment, clean some stuff. Do an overall visit and check everything.
And then I think we touched on it earlier a little bit. How about like saltwater issues, antennas, integrated stuff, CPEs, radios, coaxes,
not really.
RJ45 connectors, etc.
I will say that I don't know if it's normal for us. It's normal just to, after 4 or 5 years, if the customer or the tower is near the beach, or the everything that is metal is going to be it's going to be corrosive. So we have to change it.
Just something that you live with monthly.
Yes. For us, it's kind of a
routine.
Routinely.
Yeah.
Do you put any kind of special coating or anything on your radio mounts or anything to help keep those from rusting or corroding?
We try to use galvanized steel and stuff that lasts. So usually on the mounts, it's not a problem. Mostly, I would say it's on the brackets that comes with equipment.
Right.
Or like a non-conductive lubes or something, super lube or something in the RJ45 or the Ethernet.
Oh yeah,
ports,
for the RJ45
like
we use the lube. But most of the problems that we see are with the brackets that comes with equipment.
Okay.
Manufacturers we don't have any control on the kind of materials they use.
Different qualities of metal.
Or the brackets. So or the tower mounts, there are no issue. It's mostly the brackets that comes with equipment.
All right. So what would you do differently if you could do it all over again?
Wow. What I would do differently, I would standardize as much as I could on equipment. when you standardize on equipment, even though it limits a little bit of your capacities because you're standardized on X or Y vendor, and mostly on the multi-point, you lose the ability to have a compressive network. Let me see if I can put this forward a little bit better. When you standardize, and that's what we did a couple of years ago with Mobile Canopy at that time, when it happened it was like 15 years ago. It allowed us to grow quicker because everything is the same. It's the training for your employees is the same. The training for the support staff is the same. You deal with the same equipment, and you don't have to deal with different sort of equipment and specialize in different things. So everything ramps up and runs quicker. So when we started with testing everything, and our network was a patch of different manufacturers. And then we decided later on just to remove everything and standardize on one vendor. So I'll say that if I start again now from scratch, I just standardize on one vendor for the majority of all the multi-point network.
Well, because we've asked or answered all these other questions, I have one question left for you. So, Do you have any thermal ducting issues with any of your links around the island?
No.
Okay, so you're not really shooting over water; you're just staying inland, right?
Well, yeah, we have shots that go over water, but I kind of thought that your question was really more to thermal ducting within when you have long fields of
Inversions.
Of divergence. Yeah, we do have shots over water, and we experience some fading on those shots.
Okay.
Yeah.
How bad is it?
Usually they affect the links about, I would say, like 6 to 10 dBs.
It's not too bad then.
It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
Unless that noise floor is at negative 60s and negative 70s.
Well,
that SNR.
Yeah, those links that go over water are licensed. They're 6 gig, and we see the fading going in and out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eric, do you have any more questions?
I think that's it for me.
All right. Well, I guess we're done grilling you. Are you well done now?
No, I'm okay. I can take it.
All right. So last thing here is our tech tips of the week. Our tech tip this week is not waterproofing connectors. It's supposed to be grounding. The difference between AC ground and earth ground. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about AC ground versus earth ground?
Oh, well, earth ground, we're maybe have a common bonding point, so that we're taking a tower and going that to an authorized for your region, for your regulations to earth, usually by long. I think in the United States it's supposed to be like 8-foot ground rods, 12-foot ground rods, etc. AC ground. Are you mean in commercial common? Say
just people grounding to the ground wire that's in an AC outlet or something like that.
That's kind of that's a very long path if you're going to go in there and ground to an AC ground for your house current ground. That's a long path. I think that's more a Band-Aid. We want to ground that stuff on the outside of the dwelling before coax comes in. Cat 5 and 6 comes into the dwelling, the telecom shelter, the residential, commercial. You want to be on the outside with the shortest grounds. If you're relying on something internal and the only thing you have is that screw on the on that 50 or 60 hertz ground plate there, I think that's more of a poor ground.
And let me add to that you're taking your chances. We've seen some cases that the electricians that fabricated the house, the ground cable that is attached to the receptacle to the AC outlet, it's not grounded. It's not connected at all. It's just there hanging.
It's floating. Oh, I see.
Yeah, you just you can see it, and it's there, the green cable, but it's going nowhere.
We've taken measurements, actually, impedance and voltage measurements from soil, from outside, say NID or protection boxes or portable backup systems that are outside a shelter, and you can measure the one part of the phase, the AC voltage phase from the soil, and do a ground point if you've got we've got 110 volts or so. And yeah, there's potentials and stuff, and sometimes it's not there, and right, it's floating, or something hasn't made it all the way. If it's an old place or an old structure or brand new, it may have been improperly grounded or wired, the structure, right? So there's different things, I guess, to learn about. We check with our local regulations and so forth.
All right.
Is that what the topic?
Yeah. So that's
All
it
right.
for this episode. Gino, thank you very much for being on the show.
No, thank you guys. It's been my pleasure.
If
Great
you're
experience.
if you're in Puerto Rico, make sure you use AeroNet as your provider
Yes.
and nobody else.
Thank you.
AERO net, right?
AERONET.
All right, I see that.
AeroNet.
Wow, thanks
Right
so
here.
much, Gino. This has
So-
been
Oh,
great.
right here.
So this is the end of the How to Start a WISP series. The next series will be, again, installation best practices. So feel free to send any questions you might have over to podcast@mimosa.co. All right, guys, so we'll catch you next time on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe or follow button to stay up to date with our latest podcast, which will be available on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud.